everyone, my name is Jenna, but you guys can call me Jen, and welcome back to my channel. Welcome to my top 10 favorite books of 2021. So if you missed out on my almost favorite books of the year, please go give that a watch, because all of those books that I mentioned in that video are definite favorites of the year, and they just didn't quite make it into the top 10. So last year, actually, my top 10 favorite books of the year wasn't in any particular order, but this year I've managed to actually put it in like a 1 through 10 order, like top favorite and then some, which is kind of exciting to me because I love putting things in order. So without further ado, we're just gonna dive in. We're gonna talk about my top 10 favorite books of 2021. At number 10, we have the conclusion to a wonderful companion series, and that is Act Your Age, Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert. I absolutely love Talia Hibbert's romance books, and this ended up being one of my only 5 stars from the beginning of 2021. I absolutely adored every second of this. Talia Hibbert can do no wrong. It was just what I needed. It was just a perfect romance, and I highly, highly, highly recommend it. So this follows Eve Brown, which is the 3rd sister in the Brown family. We have also Chloe Brown, which is the 1st book, Take a Hit, Danny Brown, which is the 2nd book, and then this is the 3rd one also. Don't these just look absolutely stunning together? So good. But yes, the 3rd one made it onto my list, and it follows the youngest sister, Eve Brown, who is kind of a hot mess. She can't really hold down a job, and she doesn't really know what she wants to do with her life. And so at the beginning of this, her parents give her an ultimatum. If she can't figure it out within an X amount of time, they're cutting her off. So she goes on a drive to blow off some steam, and she stumbles upon a little B&B that has a hiring notice in the front window, and she goes in and just on the spot asks for an interview, and it ends up with her meeting the owner, and it goes absolutely disastrously. And then when she's leaving, she ends up hitting him with her car, and thus being like, you know, being a kind person, offers to look after the B&B while he goes to the hospital to get checked out because he has a bad concussion and he breaks his arm. So then she gets roped into helping him at the B&B, and they fall in love, and she finds herself and she finds her purpose in life, and it's very cute, and I love it, and it's very good, and there's autistic representation, which is just fantastic. I loved this book. It is everything that I want in a romance novel. So good. So yeah, this is number 10. Number 9 is a complete 180 from that one, and that is Hamlet by Maggie O'Farrell. This is a retelling about Shakespeare's life in the way that it doesn't actually focus on Shakespeare at all. It focuses on his son and his wife, and it actually leaves Shakespeare completely unnamed throughout the entirety of this. This is a tragedy. It is a plague book, and it follows Shakespeare and his wife's, Shakespeare and Agnes, in here she's called Agnes, love story before they had kids, and then the leading up to their family, and then like the present day where there's the fear of losing one of the twins because they have twin kids. They have the fear of losing one of the twins to the buboes, and it's very dramatic and very sad. And then it is the after of this event, like the dealing with it. So it is deeply sad. It made me sob so hard, but it was just absolutely beautiful. I'm also an English major, so anything that has to do with an icon such as Shakespeare himself, I'm all over that. I all over it. I never even took a Shakespeare course in university, but I love his sonnets, and I'm still all over this. Like, give me any book about a iconic figure from English literature, and I'm all over that. Especially retellings like this, or I have another one later on this list that is a reimagining and a retelling as well, which I'm so excited to talk about later. But yes, there is something about these hard-hitting, beautifully written literary fiction books that just hits me in some type of way. I absolutely love it. So yeah, it's set in 1850 England. The Black Death creeps across the land. I don't know, Maggie O'Farrell knew what the hell was up when she was writing this book. It is friggin' fantastic. Number 8 on this list is yet another conclusion to a series, and that is A Sky Beyond the Storm by Sabaa Tahir. It is the conclusion to An Ember in the Ashes, that saga that she has written, and I absolutely loved this book. It took me too long to be able to get to it. I wanted to reread An Ember in the Ashes, the 3 books that had previously been released in this series before this one was, and I to reread it up until the release of this, and I tried, but I got distracted by other books, and then I just got so caught up in everything, and I tried to pick this up, put it down, tried to pick it up, put it down, and then we got to 2021, and I finally said, you know what? I'm getting the audiobook, and we're doing this, and I'm so glad I did, because this was such a brilliant conclusion to the series. I love how Sabatihir used a non-conventional story trajectory throughout this series. I found it so fascinating what she did, because it's so rare that you find a series, a storyline, especially in YA fantasy, where it takes you kind of on a continuous downward slope of like these characters just keep failing and things just keep happening to them and they still have to get up every day and fight, and it's like the big culmination of this epic story. All the mythology that she brings in this very militant-esque, almost Spartan-esque world, and oh my god, it is so wonderfully done. I adored this ending, and I know I might be in the minority when I say that, but this was definitely one of my favorite books that I read this year. Number 7 is going back to another romance, and that is One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. I adored this book. I'm so glad I picked it up. Every second of this book I had a smile on my face, and I just wanted to be there experiencing this love story with these characters. I wanted to be August. I wanted to be her getting on the train every day to see Jane. It was so deeply relatable to me. August as a character just is me, and every time I picked this up to read it, I was like, wow, if only I could be August right now, because I feel her and her internal monologue so deeply. Oh, this is such a beautiful love story. So it follows August and Jane, and August is a student in New York who doesn't really know what she's doing. She's like a perpetual student, and she moves in with these new roommates. August kind of falls head over heels in love with this girl who she meets on the Q train, and finds out that Jane, the girl that she meets on the Q train, is actually stuck on the Q train from the 1970s. So it's them trying to figure out how to get her off the Q train, trying to get her back to her own time, and it's their love story, and it's just getting to know them and Jane's history, and I loved this book so much. Casey McQuiston knows how to write a funny, heartfelt, heartwarming story. Like Red, White, and Royal Blue was just absolutely perfect when I read it, and it's like an idealistic world that hopefully one day will exist. It just was the perfect bite of escapism, and when I got into this was also that in a completely different way, because I could actually relate to the characters and like find myself in August and falling in love with Jane as well, and it's just yeah, this book was fantastic. Friggin-tastic. I love it, and it'll be one that I cherish forever. Number 6 on this list is another sequel. I want to talk about the whole series as a whole when I talk about it, and that is the 4th book of the Trials of Apollo. This is the Tyrants Tomb. I don't know what it is about Rick and his series, but the 4th books of his series are always my favorite. Like we have the Battle of the Labyrinth from Percy Jackson, and we have the House of Hades from the Heroes of Olympus, and now we have this one, which is also the 4th one, that is my favorite of the series. I don't know what it is. Rick has the biggest hold on my heart that a man could ever have on my heart. He just knows. And this book comes off of the really tumultuous events of the 3rd. If you've read the Trials of Apollo, you know what I mean. And it's them dealing with that. It's the penultimate book in the series, right? And whenever you have a penultimate book in a series, shit is going down, right? They're preparing, and there's a lot of like big battles that are happening that are leading up to the end, which is going to be the 5th book or the last book in a series, if it's not a 5-book series. But I don't know what it is about Rick's penultimate books. They just get me every time. I think it's the moments where the characters are really starting to settle into their own, and where the story is really starting to get into it. It's just like, it's absolute perfection. It really is. And the whole Trials of Apollo series was like my series this year. I finally sat down to read it in full, and it was just such a wonderful time. My whole adventure for rereading both the Percy Jackson and the Heroes of Olympus, and then diving into the Trials of Apollo, was just incredible, and I think that was one of my favorite reading experiences of the year. But this series has made its way into one of my favorites of Rick's for so many reasons. It is just such a deep change from Rick's like lighthearted middle grade humor that you get in Percy Jackson. Like, he's dealing with really deep terrifying themes and villains and moments in these poor character stories in the Trials of Apollo. It is definitely a older, more mature book from Rick, and it just these books hurt so much, but they are so good, and I'm so happy that I finally read the Trials of Apollo. All right, my friends, we're going into the top 5. And that book that I was mentioning earlier that was another retelling of sorts is number 5, and that is The Other Bennett Sister by Janice Hadlow. So this one very recently made it onto this list because I read this like weeks ago, not even. So I absolutely adore this book. It is unbelievable how much I love it, just every moment of it. So this is a reimagining and a retelling of the life of Mary Bennett, the most often forgotten Bennett sister from Pride and Prejudice. So it's her life, and it like imagines it from the moments of the actual Pride and Prejudice story, and then afterwards when Mary gets her own love story, and it is just so beautiful. And Janice Hadlow has a way with the characters that is like nothing else. Like, she takes the characters from Pride and Prejudice and puts them on the page, and they feel so familiar and alike, and yet she takes them and makes them grow even more, especially Mary, because we actually get to know Mary in this book. She becomes so much more than just the girl who's shoved into a corner and who's chastised for playing the piano for too long at a party. Like, she's so much more than that, and her growth in this book is unparalleled. I used to see so much of myself in Mary from Pride and Prejudice that when I got this book, when my friend gifted it to me for my birthday, and when I knew of The Other Bennett Sister, I knew I had to get my hands on this because Mary was the sister that I would be. Sure, she's so introverted and so socially insecure, I guess is the word for it, in Pride and Prejudice, but in this, she really becomes herself, and she just takes life as it is. And oh my god, I loved this story so much. There was absolutely nothing wrong with it. I couldn't find a single thing wrong with it. Like, Janice Hadlow took the original narrative in Pride and Prejudice and expertly put it into this, but in a way that kind of like expertly like left enough of a presence of Mary in the pages as to what she was thinking at these moments, and like the really important like turn of events kind of vibe that she goes through in Pride and Prejudice, and then she takes that the few pages that Janice Hadlow takes to kind of wrap up Pride and Prejudice and give a 2-year synopsis as to what happens later is like, I was reading it and I was like screaming at my desk because it was so expertly done, and it was done in a way that I was like, okay, that feels so satisfying, and that feels like this is exactly where each of the characters would be. Mary's love interest in this, oh my god, she even gets her own version of a strawberry field scene. Like, if you know Emma, Jane Austen's book Emma, she gets like one of those scenes herself, which is so amazing because it's the scene that's used at like the moment where like things go wrong, and it's so expertly done, and the references and the lines pulled directly from Jane Austen's work in this made me smile every time they were used. If you couldn't tell, I really friggin' love these top 10 books, and this one has definitely made it onto a new favorite of all time for me kind of vibe. Like, it's going to be a reread for sure. It gave me all of the Jane Austen vibes that I wanted in a more accessible package. Like, I love Jane Austen, I've studied Jane Austen in school, but sometimes the classics are hard to get into. The prose is thick and hard to get through. So this is the perfect Jane Austen package. I love it so much. I'm gonna stop talking about it because you guys are probably like bleeding from the ears from listening to me talk about it so much, but that's what this video is. It's just me gushing about the books I love. Book number 4. Number 4 on this list. Realmbreaker by Victoria Aveyard. Oh man, I'm so shocked that like 2 YA fantasies made it onto this list. 3, if you count the Trials of Apollo book. You guys know how much I adore this book. When I read it, it was exactly the vibe that I had been searching for so long with a YA fantasy. This is what I want all YA fantasy to feel like when I read it. Like, this feels like a step between YA fantasy and adult fantasy. Like, I don't know what it is that Victoria Aveyard does with her books, but it is perfection. It is perfection what she does. It is so good. It is so good. And this is like a lot of the complaints that I heard about this book up until before I read it were that it was so dense and like hard to wrap your head around. And I'm like, that is just adult fantasy. This is a more palatable adult fantasy vibe than most people are used to, I guess. It's like, it has the expansive feeling of a Tolkien-esque world, and it is just stunning. And I am so stupid excited for Bladebreaker. So this follows a whole cast of characters. They're listed on the back. It is a fellowship like none other. It is basically what happens if the Fellowship of the Ring failed. So at the beginning of this is a big event where this gang of heroes fails in their attempt to stop this like evil lord from getting this sword and opening up a rift in the world. And it is then the gathering of another like group of people to try and save the friggin' world again as it's like currently falling apart. And it's just, I loved this book so much. The characters in this are so good. And I am so excited to reread this and just dive into how delicious of a expansive fantasy world it is. I'm so glad Victoria Aveyard is getting a chance to tell a story like this. Because I know with her Red Queen books, like they are typical 2000s, 2010s YA. You know the vibe, and they're like very focused on one character. They're like focused on like the relationship aspect of things, but like this feels like she's writing from her soul. And I think she's even mentioned a few times that she wrote this book basically for herself at 14 years old. Like, this is her fantasy book that she would have wanted, reading all of the extremely male-dominated fantasy books that she had access to, like Lord of the Rings, where there's like hardly any women characters in them. And so she wrote this for herself at 14 years old. And I think that is just beautiful. It is just beautiful. And I need to stop and get just gushing about these books, because this video, every time I do a favorites video, it's just me gushing. It's just me gushing about how much I love these books, which is, I guess, what the point of this is. But oh, I'm so excited to see where this goes. I am so ridiculously excited to see where that series goes. Oh man. All right, we're down to the top 3. I wonder if you guys could guess what they are. But number 3 is yet another fantasy book, and that is the Jasmine Throne by Tasha Suri. This book owns my soul. This is just, oh my god, it's so good, you guys. It is part of the Sapphic Trifecta that Tor was pushing this past summer with She Who Became the Sun and The Unbroken, and this is by far my favorite of the 3. And I am so in love with the way that Tasha Suri writes characters and world builds, and oh man, was this wonderful. This was probably my favorite fantasy of the year that has a romance plotline in it that it is so expertly done. Like, this year has been terrible for me with like finding books that I don't like the chemistry between the characters, or I don't see the chemistry between the two characters that are handed to us by the author. This made up for it by tenfold, because I just, it's so good. Oh my god, it is so good. I just, I loved it. I loved every second of it. It follows 2 lovely ladies and a bunch of other people, but like it focuses on Princess Malini and Priya and her maidservant Priya as they kind of get to know each other. But Princess Malini has been trapped in this temple by her brother because her brother is extremely overpowering, and she refuses to do something for him that he thinks is like the purest thing that a woman can do, and that is die. She refuses to do so. So he keeps her drugged and imprisoned. And so she's basically a shell of a person. And Priya somehow gets a position as her maidservant in this temple that Priya actually used to go to as a child, and has magic from this place. And magic in this world is quite forbidden. And it's just this wondrous reawakening of that magic. And oh man, it is so complex. I don't even know how to describe it. Like, it is truly epic. And I am beyond excited for the second one that's coming out next year. Oh man, it just becomes like a moment where I'm just like fully speechless and I don't know how to formulate my words to explain how much I love these books. Like, that is where I'm at right now. I just, Yep. All right, my friends, we are now in the top 2. Number 2 is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. This book, y'all know, it's taken TikTok by storm. It has resurfaced on the book internet and is being beloved by so many people, which I love for Madeline Miller and for all of us, because we all love being just hurt deeply by Madeline Miller's writing. And this book is so beautiful. I loved every damn page of this book. It is so lovely. The writing of this is just gorgeous. And the spinning of the myth of Achilles and Patroclus together into this just epic love story is just masterful. Madeline Miller is quickly becoming a favorite. If she could knock it out of the park again with her next book, she will be a favorite author of mine. I didn't absolutely love Circe when I read it, but like, this has made up for that tenfold. I sobbed. I know the myth of Achilles. I thought I really did, but I got it mistaken when I was reading this. I was thinking of the myth of Apollo and Hyacinthus, which is an equally tragic myth, but this one, when I got to the end, there was a moment where one of the characters says something to Patroclus that I just sat there and I went, oh no. Oh no. And I could see it all crumbling, and then that chapter after that, I was weeping. I was fully weeping reading this book. It is just, I don't know what else to say, you guys. It's the myth of Patroclus and Achilles. It's their love story. It's the Trojan War, and it's the tragedy of the life of heroes. I don't even know what to say anymore. Like, this is just exceptional, and that's why it's my second favorite book of the year. And for a long time it was my favorite, but it was eked out of the number 1 spot by a book that I really needed at the time that I read it, and is by one of my new favorite authors that I read her entire body of work this year, and that is Becky Chambers. And my favorite book of the year, number 1, is A Psalm for the Wild-Built. This is a novella, and the novella made it into my top favorite spot of the year. My guys, I would have never thought. I am the girl who reads 700, 800 page fantasy novels and devours them and loves them unendingly. And I never thought I would love a novella like this. This was everything that I needed in the moment. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was the moment that I read it in my life that I just needed it desperately, because it is just an introspective look at humanity. And when you're reading this, it's like you're sitting down to tea with a friend and you're just wrapped in a blanket and there's nothing going on and the world is perfectly still. And that's exactly what I needed with this book. And it makes me emotional to think about, because it hit me so hard when I read it. It's still hitting me hard, as you can see. Like, there's something about this book, you guys. There's something about it. This book is everything that I could have wanted, and that is why it's made it into my top spot. Like, all of these other books affected me in some type of way and made me super emotional and moved me, which is why they made it into my top 10 favorites of the year. But this one did that tenfold. So the best way I can describe this, besides the mug of tea with a friend and the world is perfectly pristine and serene, it follows Dex, who is a tea monk who is looking for their place in the world and their purpose in the world as to what makes them happy. And they go on this like little adventure with their tea cart, and they meet Mosscap, who is a robot who lives in the forest. And it is their conversations about humanity, because Mosscap wants to learn everything about humanity, and it is their introspective look in on life when they are so far removed from society as they go on this little adventure to the top of a mountain. It's everything, my guys. It's so good. All right, my friends, if I don't stop this video now, I'm going to talk about my favorite books for ages, because I could. You know how much I love my books. And especially like whenever I find favorites, they just do something to me, you know? You want to hug them so tight to you. Anyways, I don't know what I'm saying anymore. I'm a little delirious because I'm high on my love for books. Anyways, my friends, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe and like this video if you did. And I will catch you in another video very soon. Stay kind and keep on reading.